Good morning, everyone, again. Welcome to the second in our series of Adventures in Living. It's wonderful to have this many people in the Oak Room, and it will be available, of course, later in a recorded version. Anybody who's been at Oak Hammock for even 24 hours probably recognizes Jim Wiltshire on site. He's always there with that cheerful smile and that wonderful warm greeting. Jim is the second in our series of Adventures in Living, so we're anxious, all of us, to learn more about his interesting life. Jim says, "I was born in Fort Myers, but still a Gator with sand in my shoes." He graduated from the University of Florida, had service in the Navy, and then worked for several companies before buying his own business with a partner. He traveled with his lovely wife, Susan, then moved into Oak Hammock in June 2011. He says now more places to go, interesting people to meet, and then to enjoy.
Jim, did you want to say anything before the video? Nope, okay. It's going to save it for later. Well, just one moment here.
I want to thank you folks for being here today to hear my presentation about my life, and I hope you enjoy it. I certainly have to date. So with that as a background, we'll move on into the history of, that's where I want to start, with my grandparents. On my father's side, the Wiltshires came from England and came through Virginia and went up to Indiana and then came down to Fort Myers. As a railroad express agent. The railroad was what brought him down. And he brought my grandmother, Catherine, and I'm not sure how many of the 4 sons and 1 daughter he brought at that time, but they got there around 1920, so they were there to begin with. Then my mother's side, my grandfather came in, his family, in the early war, so he was already had worked his way back down to Florida, and he lived in Greenwood, Florida. My grandmother, on the other hand, was born in Dundee, Scotland, and she came over as a 6-month baby in her mother's arms there. Her father had lung problems, so they moved to Fort Myers, which was not a really good place to have a lung problem. However, that's what they did. And on the father's side, they had my father. He was born in 1911. And my mother was born in 1913. And they met in the high school. They were an item there in the high school as soon as they met. They loved to dance and do things and had a good time. And when they graduated in 1930, in 1931, my mother went to Florida State College for Women for 1 semester. My father continued in the dry cleaning business as an employee. And then when my mother came home after the 1 semester, they decided they'd had enough. It was time to get married. So they did, got married. My father then broke out on his own to have his own business. And my mother worked, and there I was, December 31, 1931. So we had quite a family there, and there I am on the pictures. You see me on the one side, and my grandfather holding me very proudly on the other side. So with that as the background, we'll now move in here. You've already learned about my mother and father a little bit. The family is shown up here as the whole family group that we ended up with that family, 5 of us. You see my father, my mother, you see me. That's my brother. He's 3 years younger than I am, so that makes him born in 1934. Just mention a couple things about him. He came to the University of Florida. He graduated in accounting, went back and formed his own business, and he and I did a lot of things growing up together, fishing and playing baseball and all kinds of things, but he's a very successful businessman. He was on the Gator Boosters here with Paul and other people, so he's well acquainted, and they are with him here at the university. My sister, 6 years younger than I am, so I didn't really have much interface with her until we became adults. But she got married, had 4 boys, and was a vice president of a bank for a while before she kind of retired and took care of my mother. So with that as background for the whole family, I'll move on into the more modern, up-to-date activity, say from the beginning of back in the beginning when I was born and right on up through now. We had, all of you had chores, I'm sure. We started out with chores and washing and drying dishes and helping with the clothes washing, things of that sort. Saturdays we would do the cleaning of the bathrooms, and we would make up our beds in the rooms, etc. And if we were good, we got an allowance, 10 cents. So we were ready to go, and we'd go to the movies, and as soon as my sister was old enough, we'd take her with us, and she would always sit with the girls, and my brother and I would sit with the older men, you know. So we'd get together, going and coming. So we had a good time. Everybody worked out fine. We'd watch The Lone Ranger and the Shadow and Tom Mix and Gene Autry and all those, you know. Some of you, I'm sure, remember some of those movies. You probably went to some of them yourself. Then for entertainment beyond that, we had radio. There was no TV back then, and computers were a thought, but they hadn't really been developed. So then we go to schools. Lee County had 3 grammar schools, and I attended 2 of them during my sojourn through. We had 1 junior high and 1 senior high. So I started out in Edison Park Grammar School, but I'll give you some of the things we did kind of early on and through that period. I joined Boy Scouts and achieved Order of the Arrow, which you had to spend a night out in the woods by yourself and come back safe and sound the next day. I had a good voice, sang soprano at that time, and joined the church choir, the senior. And a teacher in our congregation said, she was professional. She said, if you come to my house, I'll give you lessons. So how could I turn that down? So I went to her house, and she became a kind of sponsor. She lined me up with all the churches in town, and I would sing solos on Sunday as a soprano. Early on also, my grandmother's sister, one of their children had bought a dairy. So at this point, she was running the dairy, and I joined her to on Saturdays, if we'd been good, my parents would let me go because she went to the movies Saturday night, so I'd see a different picture. And then I'd go home with her. She had 2 girls, older, and we'd sleep till about 4 o'clock, and then we'd get up because the cows were coming in, and we had to milk them. We had them by hand. They didn't have any of the machines. We had to milk them, and then process the milk, load the vehicle, and then come into town and deliver to your home and your home and your home and the stores. And I also did that during the week for probably about 6 months or so. I delivered newspapers during that period for a couple of years. And then I became a stock clerk at a grocery store. And I stayed at that one. That was on a Saturday. And I pretty much stayed on that one till I got out of high school. And we made big wages there. Started out, I think it was $2 on a Saturday, and that was from like 6:45 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. I mean, we really hustled, but we had a good time. In 1885, Thomas Edison came to Fort Myers and had an estate on the Clusatcha River. His neighbor that joined him very soon was Henry Ford, and they were a nice combination out there. Edison did an awful lot for Fort Myers, besides for the nation, inventing telephones and lights and things of that sort. And they initiated, in 1938, an Edison Pageant of Light. And I'll tell you more about that in 1953. Then in 1941, the war, and Fort Myers took our Page Field, which is our commercial airline airplane, and they put in fighter craft there for training. And in Buckingham, just outside of town, bombers, so the B-25s, I think it was, and they'd go out over the Gulf to use the guns and practice targets and so forth. My grandfather, Newt, retired at about that time, and Bess, my grandmother, ran a bed and breakfast spot there. Had 4 rooms, and that continued in the war. And then during the war, she also started a Key Marge Grill downtown restaurant, which was one of the best restaurants in town. That kind of covers me and gets me up to junior high. The war got over in 1945. That's just as I was finishing up the 9th grade. So, but I was 7, 8, and 9. I was in junior high, and we had 3 different sports here, and I joined them all. Softball we played, basketball, and then in the 9th grade we started football, and I played football. We played the smaller high schools around town. We were beginning to grow that time, but we were still pretty small. In summertime, my brother and I played American Legion baseball and had a lot of fun playing in surrounding communities and going to tournaments. So I'm in high school now and played football as a quarterback, basketball as a guard, and baseball third base. We had activities there that we didn't have, particularly in the junior high. National Honor Society I was part of, sports editor for our class annual. And a key thing, I joined the Glee Club as I got in the 10th grade. I had a wonderful teacher, and we didn't have many male types in the Glee Club when I joined it. So I worked on some of the football team and got them to come join, and we had a men's double quartet, which you see up there. And we were all dressed out, and we were pretty snazzy. I was class president for the 10th and the 11th grade, and I was vice president for the 12th grade. I worked in my father's business that summer, but to go back just a hair, my grandmother, must have had some school teacher in her, because we lived right next door to her, and she'd come over in the morning about 6 o'clock and throw rocks up in my window to wake me up. And I'd come over and she'd give me a quick breakfast. But every morning, before I'd go to school, she'd check me out on my math tables, my spelling, geography, history, and government. I got all of those in an hour's time, and then I was allowed to go to school if I'd done all right. So she made sure I was living it up there. So I finished up there, and then I entered the University of Florida. That was my selection. And that was in 1949, and that was the year I graduated from high school, 49. So my first semester was 49. And Florida was a men's school at that time, had about 10,000 students. And the first place, my lodging the first year was in an old Army barracks way off to the side here. And I had 4-door room, long. I don't know if any of you ever lived in them or know about them, but it was an interesting time. I worked in the dining hall as a busboy and to earn my food during that period. And I managed to work out and have time so that I could play baseball So I played freshman baseball and lettered freshman year. Year 2, I moved over to Murphy Hall on the campus, and that was right across from the tennis court and the handball courts. I pledged a fraternity at that point and joined their quartet because we always went out to serenade the ladies in the dorms. And for interest for Okamak people, if you remember back, Art Saarinen, he was president of my fraternity when I pledged, which was something kind of unusual there. So next year, at the beginning of the year, I joined the Gainesville Naval Reserve. And you're saying, why in the world did you do that? Well, Korean War was starting to cook up, and the draft was starting to go. The Naval Reserve, I'd get paid every week for going, about $3 a week, but nevertheless, I was learning something, and their requirements were 2 years active duty and 5 years in reserves. So I went there, and then summer of '52, I went to Long Beach for 6 weeks officer training, the first session. Our fraternity was noted for its homecoming decorations, and we won a lot of prizes for that. And I became the treasurer of the fraternity, but I was really getting engrossed in my engineering studies, so baseball had dropped out at second year, and that was a good decision. The fourth year, I was the president of my fraternity and involved in this Edison President Light I mentioned before. That was celebrated in February of '53. It was celebrated every year in February. So I went down, and it was the Pageant of Light when I first went, but it has become the Festival of Light. And our CEO knows all about that. I'll refer to him again shortly. The community women would select 6 young men to be the prince and 6 young women to be the princesses the year before. Then the next year they would elect the king and the queen. And you see our coronation up here. I was elected king, and a classmate of mine from high school was elected queen. And we had a good time. We rode a float in the big parade and waved all, and it was a big deal. We had parades with dances and things. Glenn Miller was our band, and boy, that was some good dancing with that, I'll tell you. And then I went back to school. That was just a few days out of my week, and then, holy cow! Here came Susan. I met her. Now, all the fraternities at the University of Florida, it may have changed, but when we were there, all the fraternities went to check out the new people, new pledges in the sororities. You know, I just wanted to get acquainted. And I went over, and there was Susan sitting in a window, and there wasn't anybody talking to her at the moment. I said, there's a very attractive young lady. I'm going to go meet her. So I did. Turned out she'd been in New Zealand and had just come back and so forth. But the strange thing was I had double dated with her sister before they went to New Zealand, and her sister never let me know that she had a sister. So that was a good move in my life. I took an extra year because I changed my major from EE, electrical engineering, to industrial engineering. I realized, working with my father and other things, I was more interested in the business aspect than the power aspect or the electronics. But I had to finish the one because to get my commission. So I stayed in for the extra year, then graduated in February of '54 as a double E. And so now we come up to my service, because as soon as I graduated, got my commission, I received my commission as an ensign, and I was given orders, report out to the USS Gwynn in Charleston on May 31st of 1954. And you'll be the electronics officer. Now, the captain didn't tell me that. The captain didn't tell me anything. I had no words with them until I got there. But I had a minor problem in getting there, which I'll touch on just basically. I had ordered uniforms from Glen Cove Springs, a naval spot, and they didn't come. I wasn't worried. But about 2 days before, I said, I started worrying. So sure enough, they didn't come, and I made a call. They said, we never received an order. Oh, my goodness, what do you do now? So I went out to the Gainesville Reserve place, talked to the duty officer. He was about my size, had a few more pounds, but he said, well, let's see what we can do to fix you up. So he loaned me a pair of pants, and I pulled the belt real tight, and a shirt, and I already had bars beforehand. And he gave me his hat, and his hat was green with age, you know. And so when I went aboard, everybody thought, man, this guy's an old salt, you know. So, but then I got off and I reported, it's 5 hours from here to Charleston, and I had to drive it. I reported in at 11:15, and I had to be there by midnight, or I would have been facing my first court-martial, first and only, because I didn't get ready. I went to Europe on purpose. They're working, they're on the bridge with us, they're in the engine room, they're all over. On the destroyer, they got more experience probably than the New Jersey or somebody like that. But we visited Lisbon, Portugal, and there New Jersey was also in port, and they had a big diplomatic party on their fantail. And of course, each ship had to send people, and the captains were very judicious. They all sent junior officers in our whites, you know. So, but it was fun, enjoyed it, met a lot of people. And then several of us from my ship went on in town, had a good dinner. Now, we were having dinner at 6 o'clock at night, and in Lisbon and over there, they don't sit down to dinner until about 10. So we were a little early. People raised eyebrows, but they served us, so we were fine. And then we finished there and went over to Le Havre, France, and came in there, had a day or two to see with the surroundings. And then several of us took leave and went to Paris. And we had a wonderful time in Paris. Hotel was downtown, and we saw, had great food, went to some shows and things. We were there about 4 or 5 days. And it was, for a guy that I hadn't been out of Florida hardly, and for me, it was really exciting going these places. So then we came back from there and picked up the midshipmen and brought them back home again. So in 95, we went, January, February, we went down to Guantanamo to train. And we did finish there and then finished training in the Caribbean. We did a summer cruise again, same way, and picked up midshipmen, took them over, except this time we went to Valencia, Spain. Valencia's inside, but we went to Spain, and then Torquay, England. Now I saw my first bullfight in Valencia. And then we went to Torquay, England, and that was close to Wiltshire County. So I drove through that as we were going to London, because I took some leave, then went up to London. It turns out Susan graduated from the university in 55, and she and her parents had gone to Europe that summer. And we made arrangements for her to come over, and we met in I forget the name of the hotel, but we met to have tea, and I stayed at the hotel. She had a bed and breakfast in the suburbs. But we had 3 or 4 days. We saw The Boyfriend as a play. We saw everything there was to see, it seemed to me, in London. And then I came home on the ship. Susan came home and went to work for GE in Schenectady in the math labs and things. So I went to Schenectady to visit with Susan over the Christmas time, and we had a nice time, and we got engaged. So she continued on there for another month or 2, and then came on home. I went back to Charleston, and we did the routine things of saving the lost people and training new sailors. Then Susan and I got married on April 28th of 56, right here in Gainesville, Florida, at the First Presbyterian Church, right downtown. And Preacher Gordon, who a lot of you probably will remember, I'm sure the Presbyterians will, because he was a a legend. So really a special person to us. But I had one more month of active duty, so we had to go back to Charleston, and 1 month in the Sergeant Jasper apartments. And then I finished up on the 31st of May, same day I came in, and of 1956. So now we went to Florida, Fort Myers, for the summer, and I worked for the Lee County Co-op using my EE engineering to work there. The co-op served 6 rural counties. Say, for example, we covered Marco Island, Sanibel, and Immokalee, a lot of places like that. And then I returned to the University of Florida, but just from September 56 to February 57, and completed my IE degree and graduated again in 57, in February of 57. Now, I got a turn at GE because I'd accepted a job with them for their manufacturing management program for 3 years, which also included business courses at nights. And in the first location, Rome, I was fortunate in one of the classes. I won an effective presentation prize. They teach you how to organize talks and things. If you're going to be a salesman, you better learn some of those things. Yep. They built transformers there, and they give you preset assignments, but they're really jobs that would be filled by someone. So you're earning your way as you go through. Then after 1 year there, we moved to Hudson Falls, where I worked in the capacitors, manufacturing engineering, and my oldest son, Jim, was born. Now, Jim went to Dartmouth and then went with IBM, and he just retired from IBM this year. So he's had quite a good career. Then we moved to Schenectady for 6 months. I worked at Knowles Atomic Power Lab in purchasing. I was ordering materials and other things I'd never even heard of, but I had to quickly get acquainted and do that. And it was fun. It was fun. So after 6 months of that activity at Schenectady, I was moved for 1 year out to Holland, Michigan, Hermetic Motors, and I had 2 assignments there. But one of the biggest things that happened there, my daughter Betsy was born. She in Holland, Michigan. She went to Harvard, and she took a little time off, but went back, got her degree, and got married. But she started her own little business in college counseling. Her husband just retired this year, and now is working for MIT. I completed the program in February of '60, and we had to interview. Company GE sends in and says they need help in different places. So you had to interview people for these regular positions. And I did, and I selected Roanoke, Virginia, who had a lot of different things, instruments, steel mill controls, military activities, and I just liked the whole thing. And while there, I had 4 or 5 promotions, and the last one, while we were there, though, my son Bill, second son, was born in Roanoke in '62, and Bill went to Princeton for college. Then he went on to UVA for law school, and now he's a lawyer with his own firm in D.C. My daughter Caroline was born in Roanoke in '63, and she went to Yale. She didn't want to go where her siblings had been, and she went to University of Chicago for her PhD, and after being with a couple schools for short terms, she came down. She's been at the University of Florida in the linguistics department for over 25 years. So she's still here and still going strong. So after 5 years at Roanoke, I got a promotion to another part of the company, running a bigger group, and I moved, it was the capacitors, small electronic capacitors, and I moved that group at their request down to Columbia, South Carolina. Found the location, moved all the equipment and, planned, organized, moved the business, hired all the new help, had people doing that, and got it going. And then I moved up to Lynn, Massachusetts, at a higher level and with more responsibility, and built switchboards, aircraft instruments, things like that. My boss, in charge of all manufacturing there, left to go to another portion of the company, and the general manager moved me over as the acting manager of manufacturing. Thought it would be very short term, turned out to be almost a year. So I was in charge of the entire manufacturing group, quality control, materials, manufacturing, engineering, and the production aspect, until the new section manager arrived, and then I worked with him in the transition. I was with GE for 15 years total, 8 different locations, and Susan was clerk of the works to help build 2 new houses. So it was an interesting time. Then I left GE and went outside the company to get more experience, and I worked for 3 smaller companies as manager of manufacturing, the entire thing, just like I left a rubber rolls company, which was totally different, and 2 electronics. But I was getting experience in management of multiple locations. I had 11 locations in the rubber business, and I had two locations in the electronics, and the last one in Puerto Rico. So it was a good experience and at management and knowing how to meet new people and organize and do different things. I moved 2 businesses also and supervise and plan them and move them to a new location and help direct the startup. Now, the last one, I moved from a spot on the 128 all the way out for an hour and a half from my house each way. And I said, that's too far, I'll help you move. But then I want a good recommendation, I moved. So I came into town, worked in town for a little while, and then it was time for me to purchase my own business, which I did. It was a niche business. I purchased it in the early part of '86, and I took a partner. It was a machining business, totally different from what I'd been doing, except I'd been run machines before in the very early stages. But the partner I took was a mechanical engineer and a good man, and he ran inside in the shop. I ran outside with the marketing, sales, and all finance, all the other things of that sort. We started with 2 customers, and I built it up to over 5. But Gillette and Graphics were our 2 originals. Gillette was a wonderful customer. We changed not our philosophy, but you couldn't get employment people to run individual machines, so we switched and started hiring software engineer and running wire machines, automatics. But still in Gillette, they invited me there to their outings, and at one outing they put my name in for a drawing, and they called me the next day that my name had come up. And by golly, I said, what is it? They said, well, Bobby Orr is going to call you, and he's going to invite you to his club for golf, for dinner and a golf. And Bobby Orr was a big star with Boston hockey folks at that time. So that was really something special. But to help grow our business, I joined the North Shore Chamber of Commerce, first on their board and executive board, but then I was elected chairman in 1992 and grew the number of businesses from 1,100 to 1,400 and learned the names of all the legislatures. We covered from Revere all the way up to Newburyport and in between Marblehead, Salem, Beverly, just lots of places. So we had to have that many businesses join us. But we went to the legislature to ask them to provide some money to North Shore Community College to help train software people. And the builders needed electricians and regular standard plumbers, things to help them build. So we got money for it. They got it, and it worked out. And Newburyport got at it, and North Shore got some money. Now, my community involvement, personal involvement, was Beverly Hospital, United Way, and I was doing fundraising for both of those in a significant number. United Way was $1,000 million each year. Hamilton Wenham Business Council, very local. The Rotary Council, Education Fund, Accord Food, volunteered at the Accord Food Pantry, and joined the Beverly, asked to join and did the Beverly National Bank Board of Directors. We grew our business from 8 employees to 28. And I turned 65 January of '97, and I sold the business to my partner. And he was a good partner all the way. So now I'm going to enter retirement, adventure travel. And Susan and I went to many countries. A lot of them, some of the big ones went to 2 or 3 times. Like India, like China, a number of those. So, but we went to a number of countries. You see them on the board there now. So I won't read them each one, but you can see we had a good time. And that's not quite all of them, because Susan, before she was working with her mother, went to Moscow and also took 2 trips one to England and one to Scotland, walking trips, hiking trips to bed and breakfast people. 3 I'm going to talk about is Mali, Bhutan, and the grandchildren trip to the Amazon. In Bhutan, that was one of my favorite. People were wonderful. Mountains all around, and that appealed to Susan. Buddhist religion, maternal society, women-owned, tourist-controlled. The tourist section there controlled how many tourists could come in. And they were recognized also for special fine materials weavings. We came in, and fortunately they were having a big celebration around the ring, singing happy birthday. We were standing there, and some of his henchmen came out and said, "Would you like to come in?" We did. We were right there by the king watching this celebration. Wonderful time. The king was very close to the British, and they helped him set up education people to come in, not only for him, but for his top students to go to England for further training, and set up the medical plan for them. And those were 2 advanced things in those areas, so the education and medical. Pananka is still internationally recognized for cranes that visit, and we were there for cranes that visit and mate. So it was an interesting time. International crew came for that. The Buddhist priest was there to attract and expunge all the evil in the valley, and we got to witness his ceremony. At nights, we'd go to the big house for entertainment. First night, all the help and the owner and his family were there, and they sang to us. And we thought, boy, that's nice. And they said, "Now it's your turn to sing to us." We said, wait a minute, what's going on? So we got our heads together, and the only thing we come up with, we all knew, was Old MacDonald. The priest did visit us at our camp and talk to us about religious subjects, which was rather unusual. We had one member of our group who was Buddhist, and his mouth was just open the whole time. He couldn't talk. So that was that trip. So we also we went to Mali. It was among one of the first. We covered Asia. Then we go to Africa with Mali and Burkina Faso. Now, I know my neighbors around the corner have flown into their airport. Their airport was what first caught our attention. And I'll ask you how many of you have flown into Ouagadougou? Because I suspect it might not be a whole lot of people. But that also was the capital. But it was a wonderful experience, but in and out. The small village was the event I would tell you about. Outside of in Burkina Faso, a small village, walls around it with mud, huts inside made of mud, bricks. They painted them Art Deco, black and white inside. They were involved doing that. But they set our tents up on top of their houses, and they gave us a tree limb that we'd lay on there, and we'd go up and down on the tree limb. We took grandchildren to the Amazon, and I highly recommend that. The best way to get to know grandchildren is go on a trip with them, because they don't have parents to help guide them. You're it, and they're on their own. But we always took children. They were up in the 14 to 15 range generally, and compatible, like these two. One was from one family, one was from the other family. And we went down the Amazon, and as we were going, we'd see all the kinds of things that you're seeing here. From the boat, we had contests on the boat, in the dining room and the upper deck. And on the river, you'd see rafts going by, hauling anything from horses to goods to other people doing fishermen. They would catch fish and bring them to their pens to keep them alive to sell to the boat traffic. And then we visited small villages and in the small boats to schools, and they would go through their routines and things. And then they said, "Did we want to say something?" And my grandson Tommy surprised them all because he spoke their language, and he spoke out to them in their language, and they were very, very surprised, but pleased. They were pleased as well. One of the events also on that was we'd always wanted to go on shore and walk and hike. So finally they let us do it, but they hadn't told us particularly that it had been raining before we got there, and there was a lot of mud. So they put leaves down to help us walk on the leaves and stay up. But anybody that got off of it quickly sank to their knees. Many people lost shoes, socks, and we had to have crew from the ship come out and help us get people out because they were stuck. They were in their knees. They were just like they just could not move. That was an interesting part of a trip, and that one they'll always remember, I'm sure. Then we took a small boat to a huge tree, which you see, and that tree, both grandchildren and Susan climbed it, and our travel agent liked it so much that they used it for the cover for the following year's brochure. So after the Amazon trip, we took two more grandchildren to the Brazil Pantanal, and the trips with grandchildren really are great. We always enjoyed getting all the family around and having them, and you'll see pictures of all those activities. We learned a lot, they learned a lot, and you'll see some pictures here now. So I'll shut up and just let you view them. So we moved to Oak Hammock to number 2473 in June of 2011. My activities here have been, I immediately joined the chorus because I hadn't joined the quartet, but I had lunch with the mayor and Dick Martin. I was golf committee chair 2 years after Bob Bonus. I always saw the ILR courses each term, a lot of them. Blue coats with Wayne and Ray Goldwire, Wayne Forehand, Ray Goldwire. League of Women Voters with June Gerard. Flecker with Dave Rader. Health and Wellness with Henry Logan. And Finance with Pat Collier. So there are lots of things to do, and we enjoyed them all. I enjoyed them all. Now, a very special event. In 2014, we did the 10th anniversary of Oak Hammock. So I was appointed chairman for the street. Susan and I had just come back in September from a trip, and Charles Smith met me and said, "You're the chairman." So I didn't turn it down, no, so it was fine. Nobody turns anything down. They're really gracious in doing it. Richard Jones helped me. He was co-chair with me. Marilyn Hutchinson was chair, and to name and decorate the ship, which won first place, Arc de Triomphe. Diane Haynes made advisor. We've got that. And Richard coordinated the parade for us, and we had a wonderful time. We had golf carts, we had animals, we had music, loudspeakers, and we gave Hershey Kisses out at the assisted living and skilled nursing. And then we came on around to the big house, came in, and ended up there, and we had a horse race. Joe Gilkey ran it. We all presume that he was honest. Ray Goldwire won. He was on the second floor at the time, but he won the prize for that. But the mayor of it was a big deal. The mayor of Gainesville participated with attendance and a speech. The Oak Leaf publications and the library there, 10-4 to 10-10, our history library, has pictures of the ships, ports, and activities. If you get a minute, you ought to go see them. It was a wonderful event. Participation, coordination was fantastic. Great opportunity to meet, work with your neighbor, and I want to thank all the street people. They did just a fantastic job. And now I want to thank all the people that helped me prepare for this. Especially I want to thank Dick Martin. My family deserves some special recognition for all their continued support throughout my life. In addition, proud of them all and their many accomplishments. Pictures of my delayed 90th birthday party held April 2nd, 2022. We all got together. We love to get together. We get together quite a bit, and we enjoy our company. So Oak Hammock was a wise and very enjoyable choice for Susan and me. Surrounded here by friends and loved ones. In closing, the University of Florida took some pictures of Susan and myself at Lake Alice and included them in their magazine. The first one is us with happy hugs and showing how we do enjoy things. And the second one is very symbolic with Oak Hammock's activity and purpose. Sunset representing our life. Relaxed, quiet, with many enjoyable memories. Thank you for your presence today. I'll be glad to take questions. It's turned on. It's on. Okay. So, are there any questions?
Jim, when you talked about the Festival of Lights at Fort Myers, you mentioned our CEO. but I didn't hear the rest of that story. You want to continue that story and tell us about the CEO and the Festival of Lights?
Yeah, I'll give you that one just briefly. The pageant light had grown so large that the group for pageant, which was volunteers, couldn't really handle it all. So it got moved to the staging in Cape Coral, and Kevin was in Cape Coral. They had a much larger facility for all the people that were there and the dances and all of those things. So the parades and such still stayed in Fort Myers, but Kevin got to see it from a different aspect with the coronation and all the parties. Yep. So he was aware of it. And when I ran into him and said, come see it, he said, oh, yeah, I will, because he immediately recognized the Edison pageant. Yep. It was fun.
Other questions? Comments?
Jim, on the Fleet Week in Highlands, I lost something there. Was that Highlands, North Carolina, or Highlands somewhere else?
I'm sorry,
The
say
Fleet,
again.
the Fleet Week, and it had to do with the celebration here of the 10th year celebration. When you had a caption of the Fleet Week in Highlands, was that Highlands, North Carolina? Because they have a Fleet Week up there. I understand, but it said Highlands there and it threw me.
I'm sorry, I just totally missing that one, Suze.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I guess there's no more questions. Thank you for coming, I appreciate it, and